Welcome back, or welcome to the Defining Endurance Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Andrew Simmons from Lifelong Endurance. And guys, I'm excited to sit down and talk today and do a solo episode. This will also be a webisode that will be available on YouTube. So if you guys are interested, I'm also going to reference a number of articles that I've written over the years that I think will be helpful as you guys really kind of dive into this topic with me. So what are we talking about today? Well, we're kind of talking about getting started. In the last 2 years, we've seen even more runners kind of come into this space of running, and there's a lot of places to get information. I'm excited that if you're sitting here listening to this, that you're choosing me or choosing us as Lifelong Endurance as the people or place that you guys are getting your information. So as I pull a few things up here, we're just going to dive in. There's no fancy intro today. There's nothing crazy. We are just going to get right into the meat of the subject. So where do we really start? The big thing that I want people to understand is that when they start off with running, it's not going to feel comfortable, right? Inherently, it's hard to start. It's hard to start because we don't really know always what we're looking for. And so the first place that I would tell you is that if you are truly walking to this as a brand new beginner, the first thing you need to do is develop a goal. And the goal is usually best described as running continuously. If you are coming into this and you can already run 20 minutes continuously, awesome, that's great. But if you can't, run walk is not a place of shame. It is not a place where if you are someone who is truly a beginner and you're coming right off the couch, the best place I'll tell you is start by going with something as simple as a minute of running to 2 minutes of walking and progressing that, right? Adding 30 seconds to the run every week, maybe every 10 days. And I'll encourage all of you that are trying to get into running to not try and go out every single day. That will lead to disappointment. It may also lead to a little bit of overtraining depending on your training history. If you've never run before, or you've never done any other, really aerobic sports, every other day is a great and safe place for you guys to start. So with that said, you guys can figure out the minute 30, 2 minutes, until you get to a place of about 5 minutes. Once you can get to 5 minutes, I'll encourage you to start kind of breaking into larger chunks, adding a minute and a half every 7 days, until you get to about 10 minutes. And that should hopefully get you guys a good start on where to truly get started here. But I really want to break this down even more. Let's get really succinct here. And I think the best place that if I was a brand new runner starting, what do I wish people would have told me? I wish people would have told me about learning how to properly run. I'll be releasing a clinic here in January. Unfortunately, it is only for those athletes in Denver. I have not yet created a web-based clinic for this. That is coming hopefully into the future. But that's really a place to start, is learning, whether that's with a class or working one-on-one with a coach, is to learn how to run correctly, learning the proper mechanics. That'll prevent a lot of frustration and a lot of injuries on into the future. I think the next thing here is now we have to talk about the structure of things, and I think that's the best place for us to move. So let's dive into that. What's most important here is that you take a structured approach. I'm going to kind of talk here kind of some of the real basic pieces, but also make sure that you're looking at this from a broad perspective. If you are new to training every single day is a lot to transition to. So again, that every other day, whether that's a run or doing something that is in the direction of your goals, is extremely important. And this is advice to athletes all across the board, is not giving any more weight to one type of training than another. Running is not inherently better than cycling, better than weightlifting, and things like that. We can talk about efficient uses of time, and that's where running would definitely be the best use of your time, but it also depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to run your first marathon, half marathon, or even do your first ultra, you're going to want to be able to build up to getting to back-to-back days. And eventually, if you're looking at like an ultra or anything that's over 26.2 miles, back-to-back long run days of running. We'll talk about how long these things take towards the end of this episode, but the reality is that time is involved here, and the best thing you can do is take a structured approach. Start by finishing your first 5K. then the 10K, then the half, and then the full. Do you have to do it in that specific order? Absolutely not. I've worked with athletes who have jumped right into their first marathon without ever running a 10K or a half marathon before it. Of course, they'll do it in training, but the reality is that you can start anywhere on the spectrum, but being able to work your way up is the ideal state. When it comes down to it, I'm going to kind of dive into the brief overview of everything. Is base miles. What is that really? Well, base miles to me are aerobic, conversational runs where you're going out with the desired intent of finishing feeling like you could do more. That's a base run. That means you're going out, it's aerobic. And when I say it's aerobic, you could go harder. You could also go easier and probably walk or even do a jog or a saunter, but the reality is that an aerobic run is somewhere between 80 to 84% of your threshold. So let's dive into what does that really mean. When we talk about our threshold is where we're running at 100%. This is about what you could do for an hour. So your maximum holding that you could do for an hour. For some of you just starting, that's definitely going to be a run walk. Getting to an hour of running is going to take some time. And so getting to threshold also means that we're seeing some physiological changes between what fuels our body is using, whether that's by majority fat or by majority carbohydrate. Threshold is kind of that switchover point from, anything under that is, going to be a big mixture. We're going to start to see a large load of lactate at that space. So the reality is that our aerobic runs, to come back to that, are really where we're using by majority fat as fuel. They're very aerobic in nature, meaning we're not producing a lot of lactate in that space, and we can go relatively comfortably for a long time. So, moving on, now we can talk about speed work and where does this really fit. Speed work has many, many flavors. It is the Baskin-Robbins of, I guess, training, if you will. There are many different ways, and what many people use as the term speed work is different. Some people will call speed work a tempo run or a threshold run or intervals or fartlek or any of those can be considered speed work. Really what this is any work that is going to be faster than your aerobic runs. So if you think about it as a beginner, this could be anything where you are going relatively hard. This could even come in the form of hills. This doesn't mean that when you hit a hill on a run, that's speed work. That's just being able to adapt to what's happening in front of you. But we're talking about structured work, structured high-intensity work. By majority, we're going to look at speed work, and my personal definition is I separate out speed work from like tempo and threshold work, and my speed work is what I'd consider to be intervals. This is where you're going to have a large bout of high intense work followed by easy running or static standing, and that's really where speed work lives for me. Is I think speed work is things that you could do on the track. These could be hill intervals. This could even be a fartlek where you're doing a hard effort and then you're backing off slightly, but you're still continuing to run. It's not always as much of a hard and then stop as much as it is, rest, followed by intensity to rest, intensity, intense, rest, things like that. So that's, again, the second major pillar of training. The third major pillar here that I think needs to happen inside every week is a long run, some sort of longer stimulus, longer than any other part of your training in a given week. Now, you've probably heard from people that your long run should roughly consist of no more than 25% of your base mileage in a week, meaning if you're running 40 miles in a week, you shouldn't do a long run longer than 10 miles. And that doesn't always fit and always work perfectly in a paradigm. If you're trying to grow the amount of miles per week, well, guess what? You're going to need to increase that long run. And for anybody that's doing a marathon, 40 miles a week is kind of your, threshold, no pun intended, of how much you need to be able to run in a given week, relatively speaking, to finish and feel trained and feel not completely dead, assuming you pace yourself at the end of a marathon. So if you're doing a 20 miler and your max mileage in a week is 40 to 42 miles, well, that's way more than 25%. And so this is speaking to those early phases that if you're just starting and you're trying to build your mileage, try to keep it to 25%, and each week that will kind of change and adjust and grow. Another piece here to really consider is also what I talked earlier about mechanics. This is where strength training really fits in, and this is where you as the athlete can kind of grow your ability and understanding of how the body moves, how the body needs to move. Meaning, if you're in the gym, you should be doing things like single leg work, especially as a runner. If your main focus in training is running, and you are training for that 10K, that half marathon, the marathon, doing, regular squats, those are important, but doing things that challenge you in with a single leg, meaning split squats or, box step ups or Copenhagen planks or just regular planks, great core work, things like that. I could list a million of them. If you guys are curious about a program, I have one on Train Heroic called The Robust Runner. It is a 12-week program where you can follow along. It's 3 sessions a week, but 2 of those sessions are really focused on things I just talked about, single leg work. It's a progressive plan, as well as inside that, 1 workout a week is all about form, all about doing work to help you get better. So if you're a new runner, the Robust Runner training program on Train Heroic is great. I will link that in the show notes. The last thing I want to talk about here, and did not want to exclude when we talk about kind of all of the different pieces of structure, are things like yoga and high intensity interval training classes and things like that. Where does that really fit? And my goodness, how do we fit all this in? Well, this is kind of, where I would look at, structuring your week and making sure that you're not only doing things that move you in the space of running. Yoga is an amazing way to relax. It's a phenomenal way to also get a good stretch in. And I personally love doing yoga on Sunday evenings after my long run. It was a great way for me to actually get a great night's sleep and really feel relaxed and really start my week off in a great place. At that same time, I also do, regular, high intensity interval training classes. And through the years, I've gone in and out of them. I think I've used them mostly in the off season as a good way to get in a good sweat and a good workout, but don't use them when I'm really training hard, just because too much intensity too often is the bane of training. And I think before we really get into the next phase here, I want to talk about one more thing. You absolutely need to set some sort of a baseline. So even if you're doing a marathon, go sign up for a 5K or do some sort of 20-minute threshold test, 20-minute best effort, once you really starting to fall into a plan, because you're going to need to know your zones, whether that's heart rate zones or your pace zones. You need to have a Bible of which to follow. And what I mean by that is that you need to understand that threshold number, meaning what is the pace per mile or what heart rate do you hit that becomes your threshold. If that's 7 minutes a mile at 176 beats per minute, great, we know that, because from that we can say if your threshold is 7 minutes per mile, you're going to be able to run this pace for a 5K, a 10K, a half, and a full. As you train, of course, that 7-minute mile threshold may go down to 6:45, then 6:35, then 6:30, and so on as you get fitter and fitter. But what's important here is that to consistently push the body, remain challenged, you have to first set a baseline. Going out and quote unquote going hard is not just going to get you results. It will at first, yes, absolutely. Going out and going hard all the time will get you some sort of results, but it's also going to lead you to a plateau. One of the articles that I'll link in the description is how do we avoid that zone 3 plateau in training. So first and foremost here, I hope the structured approach of things helped. The next piece here is really looking at now how do we avoid some basic mistakes as we get started. So we talked briefly here about the zone 3 plateau. What is that? Well, let's talk about intensity, because the first misconception I see a lot of athletes have, and the ones that come to me that make the greatest improvements, are the ones that are stuck in the zone 3, I guess, mire, if you will. They're stuck in this slough of despond where they kind of go out and they're running relatively hard every single day. And they're finishing, and they feel like they have to finish fast to get the results that they need. And this is an illusion. This is 100% an illusion of athletes going out, training, and feeling like if I don't go hard, I'm not doing anything. And that's like, cracking an egg and only using the high function on your stove and never using medium or low to cook something. Well, yes, you will cook your eggs very fast, but they will also char and burn. They're not going to taste very good. The same thing goes with any of the other foods you're going to make. If you only use one tool in your toolbox, well, then you're only going to fix a certain small number of problems very well, and the rest will not be good. You do not want to saw a board with a screwdriver. What do I mean by that? Well, let's look at it like this. When we talk about a structured approach, here's what I want you to understand, is that hard day's hard, easy day easy. You've probably heard this, but let's bring this into a weekly structure. There's an athlete that is running every single day of the week, or maybe 6 days of the week, and I've got articles out there about how to structure for 3 days, 4 days, 5 days, 6 days, and 7 days of running. Let me give it to you like this. Monday, easy day. Tuesday, workout. This could be an interval session. This could be fartleks. This could be tempo, threshold, whatever you want to call it, a higher intensity day. Wednesday, Thursday are both aerobic runs, meaning easy run means you're going out, finishing feeling like you could do more, and that's allowing you to actually recover, key thing here, and absorb the stimulus from Tuesday, which means Friday you could realistically do another workout, do another high intensity session. Guess what's coming on Saturday? Yeah, easy day, off day, rest day. Could even be an easy run or your long run. I ideally like to have Saturday off, but if you're a churchgoer or have responsibilities on Sundays, may be hard to get your long run in, and you may need to do it on Saturday. So Sunday being the long run, the next day again, right? Monday was an aerobic run. And so this allows us to space out our hard work with our less intense aerobic recovery work. What that really means is that if you're going kind of hard every single day, it means you're not going as hard as you could on Tuesday and Friday, and kind of burning your matches each day of the week. Monday, kind of hard. You're going to go into Tuesday mildly under recovered. And that may leave you a little upset. So Wednesday you try to go after and finish hard again. So then by Thursday, you're on your butt. Well, you might need to take a day off, right? Well, you took a day off Thursday, so Friday's got to be hard. And then if Friday, was hard, then Saturday, you're probably then going to feel not like wanting to get a workout in. And then so Sunday, long run, like might as well finish that thing nice and hard. So where does that leave you on Monday? Well, again, another day off. And so this ends up creating this really sporadic and spastic type of training where it's kind of gas break, gas break, gas break. And you're never allowing yourself to get faster, truly. And you may see improvements in your times, but think about trying to put that gas pedal down real slow. And guess what? There's a clutch, and you're shifting gears. And you're able to shift gears and be more efficient with your training. This type of structure and planning also allows for a very sustainable look at training. This means that your hard days are always going to be followed by easy days, and this allows you to sustain training, meaning that you can train every single day, and those workouts are never so big that the next day you're struggling to get out of bed, you can't recover with 8 to 10 hours of sleep. You've got to be able to recover from the work that you do, otherwise even the biggest workouts aren't worth it because they aren't sustainable. So let's dive into a whole nother spectrum of things. Let's talk about speed work and what is the actual purpose behind it, because you can actually get faster simply by going out and logging miles. low aerobic easy miles are actually where I'd want a lot of you guys to start if you're just getting into this, because learning how to run and teaching your body to adapt takes time. And you don't always need to do speed work to get faster. If you just get out and you run more frequently and you're consistent, you will improve. Your body is going to become better and more efficient in running the more you do it. Just like going out and riding your bike, as a kid, you didn't have to go and do speed work to get better at riding a bike. You didn't have to go ride it hard and fast to get better at standing on two wheels. You just had to ride the bike more. And so the same applies to running. This is all about just building your body's ability. One of the concepts I've talked about recently on Instagram, go ahead and look for the post if you want, is about the idea of building a bigger bucket. Well, that bucket is your fitness, it is your capacity, it is your ability to manage running, right? We just talked about that structured plan. And if we think about emptying that bucket, if we empty it completely on those workout days and we don't have other days to fill it back up, or think about even, say, building a bigger bucket, then we're not going to be able to really train sustainably. And that bucket's going to get smaller when you're injured, and then you have less to work with and build up with. Now you start to see why coming back really hard after an injury just leads to more injury and frustration. Slow, methodical, consistent progress beats fast and hard and sporadic every single time. Let's dive into this speed work topic. What are we really trying to do here? The reality is we're trying to maximize your output at the upper end of your fitness. If we think of a scale, the lowest is our low aerobic easy runs, all the way up top to our what we call anaerobic work. And this would be true sprinting. Anaerobic would be, truly 10 seconds or less. We could get into the physiology of anaerobic glycolysis and how our muscles, go through a process where they're producing fuel for us without oxygen, right? That's where anaerobic comes from. And so aerobic means that we're going through the process of breaking down fuel and fuel sources with the component of oxygen. Now, we can understand that when we are in what we call an anaerobic environment, an oxygenless environment, that fuel is very finite. It is not something that we can sustain for a very long time. That's why you can't sprint for 7 minutes. It's not truly sprinting. True sprinting is, inside that 8 to 10 second barrier, maybe extended a little bit beyond that, but physiologically, we're working at those later sprints, even professionals. The whole goal there is to slow down as little as possible at the end, not to continue speeding up the whole time. Another discussion for another day. But the reality is speed work for distance runners, new athletes, is all about being able to sustain a uncomfortable or high-end pace for longer, and a little bit longer each time. Again, slow, consistent growth beats fast and sporadic every single time. The other thing that we do with speed work is we really increase your efficiency. When we're running, we're going through a neuromuscular process. And at first, running fast can feel really weird. Heck, running alone when you're first getting started feels weird and clunky. But then trying to run fast, be smooth, and not overly strain and hunch and be contorted, that's really where we're going to be able to gain efficiency. Is when our body can kind of run and be smooth and efficient. That's also going to translate into your easy runs. And this is where we really kind of shift the scale. So when we think about training, if you think about 2 points on a scale, just imagine a ball with a string and a ball floating in space. That top end, consider that to be your threshold, the bottom end to be your easy pace. Now, with those 2 points, when you go and you do speed work and you consistently do speed work week after week, you start to shift up and across, meaning your ability to sustain that threshold pace gets better and better when you do longer and longer intervals, and that kind of moves you along the x-axis. But also with that, it moves you along the y-axis, assuming that you adapt, meaning your threshold moves from that 7 minutes a mile to 6:30. Well, guess what happens to that bottom point? Your everyday easy pace moves along with it. Now, if your everyday easy pace is, say, 8 minutes to 8:30 per mile, and your threshold is 7 minutes a mile, I'm just making up some numbers here, and you do some consistent speed work, and you're keeping up with consistent mileage, and you're recovering, and you've got recovery weeks built in there, realistically, you can move that 8:30 7-minute paradigm to 8 minutes 6:30 or 7:45 to 6:10, right? Depending on how much work you're doing. And that's what we call training. That's the adaptation principle, is that we do specific work to get a specific result. So here's the thing. Here's where people get really, really caught, is that they think that, well, again, it's like the zone 3 principle. More is better, so harder and faster with every interval must be better. Well, if you remember, we kind of dialed back here. If you had not set your zones, you've got no business doing speed work, because you have no way to be succinct and specific about what you're doing. You have to have an understanding of what your 5K, 10K, half marathon, marathon pace is, and heck, even your mile pace. All of these things are important when you're beginning because they give you direction. Otherwise, everything's hard, and you're going to pace yourself like a kid who's been given way too much sugar, and you're going to peter out towards the end of these things because you're going to start too hard. The hardest thing to figure out is not how to train more. It is how to pace yourself and have control, especially as a new runner. So when you're reading a training plan and they say 8x400 at 5K, and you go, okay, hard as possible. 5K is not hard as possible. What you're really trying to do here is that 5K pace is a sustainable, yet hard enough pace to elicit a specific result. If you are going out and racing every single interval as hard as you can, you are not going to get the desired result. That also means that you are not practicing what the underlying workout is trying to deliver. 8x400 at 5K, you're probably going to be trying to relax and be comfortable and efficient and smooth at that 5K pace. Resting, recovering, and going and doing it again. These intervals are important, and the reason we need to do speed work is that it allows us to relax. It teaches our brain neuromuscularly what are efficient patterns that we need to develop. So again, we reinforce those patterns by strength training in the gym. We're going out and we're doing these easy runs. Again, we get faster and faster at those easy runs by doing speed work. It all starts to make sense once we have a chance to explain it, but it's not as easy as go hard as often as you can, as hard as you can, and hope your body recovers. Sustainable running is created when we have self-control. So, let's talk this how much, how often with speed. When it comes down to it, you'll see in the article I post about the Zone 3 plateau, I've got no problem with athletes running in Zone 3. It's a normal part of training. In fact, we race quite often in the Zone 3 area, especially in the half marathon and even later parts of the marathon. And my problem isn't with people having a workout or working out once or twice a week in that Zone 3. Where we get caught is when Zone 3 is where you end up every single run. So I'll say that again. If you are ending up in your Zone 3 every single run, one of two things is happening. You are going too hard, too often, and you are lying to yourself that you are running aerobically. The other potential here is you haven't updated your zones and you haven't recently done a fitness test, and that Zone 3 is actually easy. It's not hard, but your values are off, and so you need to retest. But more than likely, probably going too hard. And that doesn't mean I don't believe in you. That doesn't mean that I think you're lying to me. I have just seen it too many times over the years that athletes do not practice good self-control because there's this belief, again, that if they are not going hard, what's the use? Okay? So let's talk about this idea of how much, how often with speed. I want you guys to avoid it and avoid doing it every single day. Just like we talked, that Tuesday, Friday, 1 to 2 days in between your speed work sessions is vital and important. How about tempos, intervals, fartleks? Can I do interval sessions every single week? Where do tempos fall? Is it better to do one early in the week and one later in the week? The answer is no. There is no hard rule about tempos on Tuesday and then, speed work on Friday. It's really about when you have access to these things. There's no, oh man, I should have done my tempo on Tuesday and I would have run faster on my 5K 7 weeks later. There's no way anyone can correlate that, and it's a useless way to look at it. What I would say is, and what I like to look at, and this is actually from a coach that I was coached by, Brad Hudson, is that throughout a 2 to 3 week cycle, you want to hit every kind of stimulus at least once. And this is kind of the idea of never really dulling yourself in terms of speed throughout your entire buildup. So hit hills, hit fartleks, hit tempos, hit interval speed work. And depending on what you're doing and what portion of the cycle you are in, whether you're building your base or getting race ready and super specific for your race, you still need to do this work. You still need to be able to hold and maintain and be efficient. You also need to run fast and run hard to keep your anaerobic systems in place. And running uphill is phenomenal for your mechanics. So that's really where how much, how often, I would limit by majority, unless you are an elite or even on the edge of elite, to 2 workouts a week. Now, if you want to consider them true workouts, I'm talking about warm up and cool down. I may occasionally throw in a hard long run for somebody, and I guess you could call that a 3rd workout per week. But the reality is that if you are a beginner, start with 1 workout a week for the first year. Let me echo that again. New people, 1 workout per week for the first year. Here's why. You want to run 1 workout a week because your body is still adapting to running. You are getting a higher bone density. Your muscles and tendons and all of that are getting used to a new stimulus. Trying to throw a lot of speed work at that is going to result in an overuse injury. Your body needs to adapt to running first and running easy first. Then we can talk about running fast. We can talk about running fast for a long time. But the first year, your body is and your time is best spent just learning how to run easy, getting comfortable, building a base, because that baseline fitness serves you the rest of your running career. All right, we're going to get into the final kind of bit of this here. Where do we really talk in terms of how long does it actually take? I know I alluded to this in the early parts of this episode of how long does it actually take to adapt? Well, realistically, I would say that if you're going to do your first marathon, if you're sitting to this listening on the couch saying, gosh, where do I even get started? If you're trying and saying, I'm going to run a marathon, well, I would give yourself a full year to train for that marathon. And I would encourage you to try all of the different flavors of distances, if you will, across the board. And I would say that you need to look and structure your goals accordingly. That first year, accomplishing a half marathon is phenomenal. Running multiple 5Ks and 10Ks, excellent, right? Those first 5Ks and 10Ks, when you compare them to your later races, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, the reality is that those first races are where you're going to learn how to pace yourself. You're going to learn, for that half marathon, how to fuel your body to be able to run 13 miles. You're going to understand the importance of hydration. You're going to learn and make a ton of mistakes. So do not look at, I'm going to qualify for Boston in my first marathon. That is a very, very big step for many athletes to make. Now, am I saying it's unrealistic? No. We've done it before. Athletes will do it year to year, year over year. First marathon, Boston qualifier. I love your genetics. I love it. It's not realistic for many people out there. So what does that really mean? Well, if you're looking at Boston, most runners take 3 to 5 years from when they first start marathon training to get there. Some will never get there. And that's not the point. The point is not to run the Boston Marathon. That's not the goal of this podcast. The goal of this episode specifically is how do you get started? If you're going to do your first race, I would say give yourself at least 6 to 8 weeks, up to 10, to get ready for your first 5K. And this is someone that's sitting on the couch. If you're a beginner and you've been running for a year, maybe 2 years, and just kind of dabbling in a few races here or there, and you want to jump up to a half marathon to a marathon, I really think that 12 weeks is a great place if you have a base. 16 weeks if you do not. I like a 4-week base period and then 12 4-week cycles to get you ready for a half marathon. I'll move up to 20 weeks even for a full marathon cycle, especially if they haven't done any running, of double-digit miles. Meaning if you've never run over 10 miles, I want to get multiple 15, 16, 18-mile runs in your legs before we even bridge into 20, 22 miles in the buildup. And that's the reality of what it takes. One 22-mile run will not prepare you for a marathon. And so it's being able to consistently train and get ready for that marathon. And so that consistency is really what we're building over that 20 weeks. And that's why it takes so long, is your body has to adapt. And if you're getting right off the couch, that's why I want at least a year before we're doing multiple workouts a week, because that body needs time. It takes time for your body to adapt to these things. You may be amazing and learn super quick and build fitness super fast, but your body eventually will hit some sort of plateau and wall that's going to take time to get through. Now, hopefully it's not an injury. Hopefully it's not an overuse injury and we're recovering and we're eating well. And this is why we have this podcast in the first place, is I can't sit down for 8 to 10 hours and give you the entire way of how to train, because it changes and adapts depending on your work, your life, your stress, what you're eating, the time of the year, what you're training for. There's so much to consider in this, but this is just simply a place to get started, an episode to get started. So where would I have you go to kind of pull all of this together? Clearly, this podcast is, we own Lifelong Endurance. This is a coaching company that we are here to help serve triathletes and runners. Everything from getting your first mile and racing that hard to 200 plus miles, multi-day stage races, mountaineering, things like that. Coach Lexi, myself, Coach Zach, Coach Hillary, that is what they do very, very well. Coach Katie, Coach Laura, phenomenal strength training. Hillary is included in that amazing set of strength coaches we have. But Coach Laura and Coach Katie are our triathlon coaches. So if you're also thinking, hey, running is fun, but I also like to swim and bike, get a hold of them. We're going to be having some really cool plans and everything like that linked in the show notes here for you guys to be able to find. These are all resources, but if you are looking for the most efficient way to get results, consistent results, one-on-one coaching cannot be beat for that. I will leave the shameless self-promotion there and really talk about how do we wrap this up? How do we pull this all together? Where do you start? Mechanics and building mileage. This is a consistent thing. You need to think about this from a periodized standpoint. If you're building up, build up for no more than 3 weeks before you take a week that is more like your second week, right? Meaning in terms of volume, if you've gone 20, 24, 26, then you need to have another week at that 22 to 24 mileage time frame and distance, because that's where you're absorbing the training. That is what a rest week is for. That's what those easy days are for in your schedule. This is talking really micro to macro to big, right? We have to have an off season as well as a season where we are actively training. That's periodization. That's just allowing the body to recover from an applied stress. So we talked about where do we start? The structured approach, right? We talked about base miles. We talked about speed workouts. We talked about the need for strength training. We talked about long runs. We talked about setting your zones. That's super, super important. Why would you even consider speed work in your build-up, right? We got to kind of push that whole spectrum up, and we use speed work to do that, and that is kind of our fast ticket. It's not our only ticket, though. How much, how often? This is where we really talked about our weekly schedule and really trying to break it up so that we have that ability to absorb it. You guys are starting to see that if the work that you do has to be absorbed, otherwise it is in vain. You are not going to fully get the results of your hard work if you do not recover from it. And then last but not least, this stuff takes time. If you are trying to achieve a true peak result, 16 to 20 weeks to get ready for a 10K, a half marathon, a marathon, plenty of time in those time frames. If you think that you are going to get marathon fit in 8 weeks, you are fooling yourself. Plain and simple. I also don't want to see people get injured. I don't want to see people try to cobble together a training plan just to go run with friends and things like that. You have to arrest yourself to self-discipline and be able to say, you know what, guys, I'm going to join you, but I'm going to have to run walk this because my fitness isn't there yet. Because you want to be able to walk 2 weeks from that and not have a nagging injury so you can get back to training, and hopefully the next time your friends do a marathon, you're able to run it with them the whole time. So with that said, I hope this was a helpful solo episode where we kind of break down the true basics of getting started and why they are important. I love to share with you guys as much knowledge and information that I have. So I hope this episode was helpful and useful. And if you guys are watching online, let me know. Give me a thumbs up. Let me know what the most important part of this was. If you guys are just listening and I'm in your headphones or I'm in your car right now, do me a favor. What's going to help me most and help grow this podcast is a couple of things. One, go ahead and look online for Lifelong Endurance Coaches and Athletes page. It's our Facebook page where we help answer questions just like this whole episode. Do you have questions about when to do intervals or want to see and talk to one of our coaches? Great. This is a great place to interact with them and ask some basic questions. What else helps our podcast grow is giving us a like and a subscribe on YouTube. We post as many of these videos as we can when we record them, but also leaving us a review in the Apple Store. That is the easiest way for us to grow our podcast. It's where when we're looking for advertisers or they're looking at us, it's where they look first. They want to see that we have reviews. They want to see that our episodes are helpful. Tell us what you like about this, because if we don't know, we don't live in your brains. I can't know what you love about this or what you want to see more of, or heck, less of. Less solo episodes, less me talking at you. Maybe that's what you don't like, and you probably already shut it off and aren't listening at this point. But if you're still listening, do me a favor, take a chance, leave us a review. Let us know that you like this. Didn't, let us know what to. I love honest reviews. It makes us better. So without any more talking, I will let you guys go, and we will talk to you guys next week.